Betrayed by the Council, Earth's war fleet emerged and unleashed total destruction. The Galactic Council chamber was the most powerful room in the known galaxy. A great circular hall with 17 seats arranged in a perfect ring, each seat belonging to a different species, each species representing billions of lives across hundreds of star systems. The walls were made of a pale blue crystal that hummed softly when the air recyclers worked, and the floor was polished so well that every delegate could see their own reflection looking back up at them. Marcus Webb had walked into that chamber hundreds of times over 11 years. He had argued there, laughed there, shaken hands and signed treaties and shared meals with beings whose faces looked nothing like his own. He had called this place his second home. He had trusted every single person in that room. That was his mistake. The session had been listed on the official schedule as a frontier border redistribution discussion, a dry, boring title that most junior staff did not even bother to read fully. Marcus had seen that kind of language before. It usually meant some small territory dispute between two minor systems, something that took an afternoon to resolve and was forgotten by the next morning. But when Marcus walked into the chamber that day, something felt wrong immediately. The air was different, heavier somehow. The other delegates were already seated, which was unusual because most of them arrived late out of habit. Nobody was talking. None of the usual small conversations before a session, no jokes exchanged between the Torvian rep and the Kailu ambassador, or no arguments about seating arrangements from the Shreth delegation. They were all just sitting there very still, not looking at him. Marcus took his seat at the human chair, the one with the small blue Earth flag pinned to the side, and he set his datapad on the table. He looked around the room and tried to catch someone's eye. The Torvian ambassador, a tall, gray-skinned being named Olavesh, looked at the table instead. The Kailu rep, who had attended Marcus's birthday gathering just 2 months ago, stared at the wall above his head. The council head, a wide-bodied, six-armed being from the Drenath species named Sorvak, called the session to order without the usual formal greetings. "We are here to vote on a matter of galactic security," Sorvak said, his deep voice filling the chamber without warmth. "On the matter before this council is the formal transfer of Sector 7, which includes the human home system and all registered human colony stations, to the Vreth Dominion, effective immediately upon unanimous vote." Marcus did not move. He heard the words. He processed every single one of them. But for 3 full seconds, he sat completely still, because his brain refused to accept what his ears had just delivered to it. Then he stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the polished floor. "What?" he said, and his voice came out quiet, not loud, which surprised even him. Sorvak did not look sorry. "The Vreth Dominion has presented this council with terms that protect the stability of the galactic trade network. The alternative, continued resistance to their expansion, risks open war across 14 star systems. And the Council has determined that the transfer of the human sector represents the most logical path to lasting peace." "You are selling us," Marcus said, and now his voice was not quiet at all. "You are trading human lives, billions of human lives, to buy yourselves safety. You are handing our home to an empire that uses conquered species as labor workers and resource harvesters." Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. Nobody even looked at him. "The vote will proceed," Sorvak said. Marcus looked around that room, at every face he had trusted, every being he had stood beside, every delegate he had considered something close to a friend, and he watched them all raise their hands. One by one. Every hand. All 16. Not one single abstention. Not one moment of hesitation from any of them. The vote passed in under 40 seconds. "You will be escorted to holding quarters while the transfer arrangements are finalized," Sorvak said, already looking down at his next document. "Your communication access will be suspended for security reasons during the transition period." Two council security officers appeared at Marcus's sides, large, armored, expressionless. They took his datapad from his hands. They removed the small comm unit from his jacket pocket. They began walking him toward the side exit of the chamber. Marcus did not fight them. He walked. He kept his face calm. He had learned a long time ago, before the council, before the diplomacy, before all of it, that showing panic was the worst thing a person could do when everything was falling apart. And they put him in a holding room on the lower level of the council tower. A clean room with a cot and a food dispenser and nothing else. The door locked with a heavy click behind the guards. Marcus sat on the cot for exactly 1 minute. Then he reached up to the collar of his jacket, the formal blue diplomat's jacket he had worn to hundreds of sessions, and he pressed his thumb against a small raised seam on the inside edge. A tiny panel opened. Inside was a transmitter no larger than a thumbnail, a piece of hardware he had never told the council about, had never registered with any authority, had kept hidden and powered down for 11 years because he had hoped, genuinely hoped, that he would never need it. He had sewn it in himself on his 3rd year at the council, and after a quiet conversation with a very old human general who had told him, always have a way to talk to home when everyone else has taken your voice away, he powered it on. It would take time for the signal to reach Earth. The council tower's shielding was thick and the transmitter was small, but it would get through. It always got through. Marcus held the device close to his mouth and spoke in a low, clear voice. "This is Ambassador Marcus Webb, Council Authentication Code 77 Delta 9, Emergency Transmission, Highest Priority. The Council has voted to transfer full human sovereign territory to the Vreth Dominion. The vote is complete. No warning was given to Earth. A Vreth war fleet is likely already moving. I repeat, no warning was given. Heck, this is not a drill. This is not a test. This is a real betrayal, and you need to move right now." He kept talking for another 2 minutes, every detail he could remember, every word Sorvak had said, every name of every delegate who had raised their hand. Then he powered the transmitter down and hid it again inside the collar seam. He lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling of his locked room inside the most powerful building in the galaxy, surrounded by species he had trusted with everything. And he thought about Earth. He thought about whether they would get the message in time. He thought about what would happen if they did. And for the first time in 11 years of smiling across that council table, Marcus Webb allowed himself a very small, a very cold smile, because those delegates had spent 11 years watching him and thinking they understood what humanity was. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Betrayed by the council, Earth's war fleet emerged and unleashed total destruction. The signal arrived at 0340 Earth Standard Time, when most of the planet was asleep, and the night shift operators at Deep Listen Station 7 were on their 3rd cups of coffee and their 2nd arguments about what to eat for breakfast. The operator who caught it was a young woman named Private Tess Okafor, 22 years old, 8 months into her first posting. She almost flagged it as a ghost signal, the kind that came through sometimes when solar winds messed with the relay arrays. But something made her run the authentication code through the system one more time. A 77 Delta 9. She had been trained what to do if that code ever appeared. Every operator at every deep signal station on Earth and across all 4 colony stations had been trained for it. She had honestly assumed it was the kind of training that existed only on paper, the kind of emergency protocol that got written up and filed and never actually used. She hit the direct escalation button without hesitating for even 1 second. The alert reached General Dana Cole at 0347. General Cole was not asleep. She rarely slept more than 5 hours, and those 5 hours usually happened between 2300 and 0400. So she had already been awake for nearly an hour when her secure terminal lit up red and began screaming at her from across her bedroom. She crossed the room in 4 steps, read the first 3 lines of the transmission summary, and then got dressed while listening to the full audio playback of Marcus Webb's voice. She did not panic. She did not cry. She did not stand at the window and look at the sky dramatically. She picked up her command phone and called 4 people in the following order: the Chief of Human Defense Forces, the Director of the Outer Colony Security Network, the Commander of Jupiter Station, and finally, a man known only by his operational title, the Keeper. The Keeper was old, nearly 80, and he had held his position for 31 years. Nobody outside of the highest levels of human military command knew his real name or what he looked like. His job had one purpose and one purpose only, and that purpose had been waiting quietly for 3 decades. "Keeper," Cole said when the line connected, "Our authorization code is Iron Cradle. This is not a simulation." There was a pause of about 2 seconds on the other end. "Understood," the Keeper said. His voice was very calm, the kind of calm that only came from a person who had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this moment. "Beginning full activation sequence now. Estimated full readiness, 14 hours. "You have 12, Cole said, and ended the call. She had 17 hours before the Vreth fleet, based on their known travel speeds and the most likely launch point, given the Council's decision timeline, would reach the outer edge of the solar system. 12 hours for full activation. That left 5 hours of buffer. Cole did not like using buffer time, but she liked being destroyed even less. Not what happened in the next 12 hours was the most extraordinary thing in human history, and almost nobody on Earth knew it was happening. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a vast underwater facility built into a trench so deep that no non-human scanner had ever successfully mapped it, a series of massive hangar doors began to open. The water around them churned and boiled as enormous engines that had been sitting in powered-down standby for years, began to breathe again. Behind the shadow of Jupiter's largest moon, a cluster of objects that had appeared on long-range scanners as ordinary debris, just rocks and ice chunks drifting in stable orbit, began to move. Their disguise systems, layers of false surface material bonded over titanium hulls, began to release. Underneath the rock and ice were warships, long, dark, the sharp-edged warships with weapon systems that had never once been fired in a real engagement. Inside a hollowed asteroid in the middle of the belt, one that the Council had been given survey data for and had concluded was a standard mining operation, the interior lights came on in sections, one after another, filling a space large enough to park a small city inside. There were no miners in there. There had never been any miners in there. There were only ships, 12 of them, carrier class, each one capable of launching 40 fighters from its belly, and the crews who had been living and training inside that asteroid for the past 4 years. This was Operation Iron Cradle. It had started 41 years ago after a quiet meeting between a small group of military historians, defense analysts, and strategic thinkers who had spent long careers studying how civilizations fell. Their conclusion had been simple and uncomfortable. Every civilization that had been absorbed, conquered, or destroyed by a larger power had made the same mistake. They had shown the full extent of their strength too early, too openly, and too honestly. Earth had done what those analysts recommended. Earth had registered a small patrol fleet with the Council, respectable enough to be taken seriously, small enough to never threaten anyone. Earth had acted the role of the humble newcomer, grateful to be welcomed, eager to cooperate, careful never to seem dangerous. And quietly, in the dark, for 41 years, Earth had built. Not out of aggression, not out of a desire to conquer anyone, but because those analysts had also said something else in that original meeting, something that had been passed down through every level of human defense planning ever since. Hope for peace, prepare for betrayal, trust your allies, but never bet your species on that trust. By 1200 hours, General Cole stood in the main command center of Bunker 16, the deep mountain facility in northern Canada that served as Earth's true military brain, and looked at the activation board. 260 warships, fully powered, fully crewed, fully armed, were now positioned across the solar system. 23 of them were pure siege platforms, designed to hold a position and pour sustained fire into anything that came close. 41 were carrier class. The rest were fast attack and escort ships built for speed and precision. Now, none of them appeared on any council registry. None of them had ever been photographed by a non-human sensor array. As far as the galaxy knew, they did not exist. Cole looked at the readiness board for a long time. Then she looked at the tracking display on the far wall, where a cluster of red contact markers, the Vreth fleet, was moving steadily toward the outer solar system. 94 ships, a powerful force by any standard in the galaxy. The kind of fleet that had made 12 other civilizations kneel. Cole did not feel fear when she looked at those red markers. She felt something much quieter than fear. A kind of heavy, focused stillness that she had been carrying for a long time, waiting for the moment it would be needed. "All commanders, all stations," she said into the open fleet channel, and her voice went out to every single ship across the solar system at the same time. "This is General Cole. The fleet is active. Our home is on the line. You all know what to do. Let them come in." Betrayed by the Council, Earth's war fleet emerged and unleashed total destruction. Vrathka had conquered 12 civilizations. He had a wall in his personal quarters aboard the command ship where he kept small framed images of each one. The moment of surrender, captured on camera, the enemy leader kneeling or bowing or simply standing with their hands raised and their faces broken. 12 images, 12 victories. He was the most decorated fleet commander in the entire Vreth Dominion, and he had never once lost a campaign. He did not expect the 13th to be any different. His briefing file on humanity was thin, thinner than any other species he had been assigned to subdue. Category 2. Minimal threat. A small registered patrol fleet of 31 ships, most of them light class. A population spread across one home world and 4 colony stations. A young spacefaring civilization, barely 1 century into interstellar expansion. Diplomatically active, militarily weak. The Council had already voted. The legal transfer was done. Technically, this was not even a conquest. It was a handover. The humans were supposed to surrender peacefully when his fleet arrived, accept their new status under Dominion authority, and begin the integration process within 30 days. Vrathka fully expected to be back home within 2 months. His fleet crossed into the outer edge of the solar system at 0600 Earth Standard Time, the morning after the Council vote, and the first thing his long-range sensors reported was something that made his navigator look up from her screen with a slightly confused expression. "Commander," she said, "I am reading no patrol activity at the outer boundary." Vrathka looked at his own screen. The patrol ships that the Council registry listed as Earth's outer defense line, 7 ships that should have been running standard rotational sweeps near the system's edge, were simply not there. "Sensor malfunction?" he asked. "Running diagnostics now," the navigator said. "No, sensors are reading clean." "There is genuinely nothing out here." Vrathka decided this meant the humans had already heard about the Council vote and pulled their ships back in fear, a common response from low-tier civilizations when they saw his fleet coming. He found this slightly disappointing because it made the whole thing feel less dramatic, but he moved forward without concern. As his fleet pushed deeper into the solar system, the reports continued to come in, and each one was the same. The orbital stations near the outer planets, empty. Not destroyed, not damaged, just dark and silent, like someone had simply turned off the lights and walked out. The automated mining platforms in the asteroid belt, still running their programs, still extracting, but no human ships nearby. The communications relays, active broadcasting standard carrier waves, but no voices on any of the human channels. By the time Vrathka's fleet reached the inner system, his senior officers had gathered in the command room, and the mood had shifted from confident to uneasy. "Where are they?" asked Sub-Commander Drevath, a gray-plated officer with 30 years of Dominion service. He was looking at the tactical display, which showed the entire inner solar system laid out in detail, and the human home world sitting there like a small blue stone, quiet, seemingly undefended. "They ran," said another officer, Lieutenant Vreva, young, ambitious, eager to believe in simple explanations. "They got word of the council vote and they evacuated. They fled into deep space, hoping to avoid us." "A full planetary evacuation in less than 20 hours, Drevath said. And he did not sound convinced. Billions of people? Nobody had a good answer for that. Vrathka stared at the display for a long time. He had a feeling that he did not like and could not name, a feeling that lived somewhere in the back of his neck and would not go away no matter how many times he told himself that humanity was Category 2 and minimal threat and not worth worrying about. He ordered a full sensor sweep of the asteroid belt. The sweep came back clean. Nothing but rocks and ice and the ordinary scatter of debris that filled any belt system. His technology was excellent. The Dominion sensor arrays were among the best in the quadrant. If there was something hiding in those asteroids, his equipment would find it. It found nothing. He ordered a gravitational scan of the space behind Jupiter's moons. The scan showed stable orbital debris. Nothing unusual. He ordered a deep-range sonar pulse aimed at Earth itself, checking for large-scale underground installations. The pulse returned data consistent with a normal inhabited world, underground infrastructure, subsurface construction, nothing that registered as military beyond the small registered base network that the Council files already documented. Vrathka's fleet sat in the inner solar system and found absolutely nothing to worry about, and somehow that made everything much worse. "Move us to holding position above the human homeworld," Vrathka ordered finally. "We will broadcast the formal transfer announcement and demand their governmental leadership present itself for transition protocols." His communications officer began broadcasting on all human frequencies. There was no response. For 40 minutes. In his fleet broadcast the transfer announcement and received nothing back. No voice, no signal, not even a standard acknowledgement ping. Then Vrathka's personal comm unit activated. It was a direct transmission, tightly focused, clearly from a human source. Strong signal, professional equipment, nothing about it suggested desperation or fear. "This is General Dana Cole, Commander of Earth Defense Forces," said a woman's voice. Calm, steady, with no shakiness in it at all. "Commander Vrathka, I know you can hear this. I want you to know that we received the Council's decision. We understand our situation completely. Before we proceed to the next stage of this interaction, I have one message I need you to pass along." Vrathka leaned forward. "What message?" "The message is for the Galactic Council," Cole said. "So please tell them to watch the sky." Then the transmission ended. Vrathka looked at his communications officer. The officer looked back at him. Nobody in the command room spoke. "What does that mean?" Lieutenant Vreva asked, and for the first time, she did not sound confident. Down in his locked room in the Council Tower, Marcus Webb felt his tiny transmitter activate with an incoming signal. He pressed it to his ear. He heard Cole's voice, brief and clear, telling him to relay a message to the Council. He did not fully understand the instruction, but he had spent 11 years learning to trust Dana Cole's judgment on things he did not fully understand. He powered his transmitter to broadcast mode and pushed the signal onto every open Council frequency available. Watch the sky. Across the galaxy, Council delegates looked up from their desks. They looked out their windows. They looked at their sensor feeds. They looked at each other with confused expressions, trying to understand what that meant and why it had come from a locked holding room in their own tower. Back in the solar system, Vrathka was still trying to decide how he felt about those 3 words when every sensor array on every one of his 94 ships screamed at once. The asteroids were moving. The space behind the moons was moving. The deep water below Earth's oceans was moving. 260 human warships decloaked simultaneously. appearing out of nowhere all around his fleet, above and below and on every side, filling the tactical display with blue contact markers in every direction. They had been there the whole time, perfectly hidden, or perfectly patient, waiting for his entire fleet to be too deep inside the system to run. Vrathka looked at his tactical display for a very long time. Then he looked at the human Category 2 file that was still open on his secondary screen. Someone had already changed the category field. It now read 2 words where there had previously been a neat little threat ranking. The 2 words were Category Unknown, Betrayed by the Council, Earth's war fleet emerged and unleashed total destruction. For exactly 43 seconds after the human fleet decloaked, nothing happened. No shots fired, no charges launched, no warnings screamed across the comm system. Just 260 human warships sitting in perfect formation around a Vreth fleet that suddenly felt not very small, and 94 Vreth commanders staring at their displays and trying to understand how they had flown directly into the center of something they never saw coming. Vrathka was a professional. He had been in combat before. He had felt the cold drop in his stomach that came when a situation turned bad, but he had never felt it quite this suddenly or this completely. His tactical officer was running numbers furiously, comparing fleet strengths, calculating firing angles and escape vectors, looking for options. The officer finally looked up and said nothing. He just slowly shook his head. Vrathka opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships hold position, do not fire, do not maneuver, wait for my order," he said, keeping his voice flat. He needed time to think. He needed 30 seconds of nobody doing anything stupid. Now then, General Cole's voice came through on every Vreth channel at the same time, calm, unhurried, like a person discussing the weather. "Commander Vrathka, this is General Cole. Your fleet is fully enclosed. You have no exit corridor that is not covered by at least 8 of my ships. Your communication relays to Vreth space have been disabled in the last 90 seconds. Your empire cannot hear you right now. I am not saying this to frighten you. I am saying it so that we can have an honest conversation without misunderstandings." Vrathka checked his long-range comms. She was right. The relay signals were gone. He was cut off from the Dominion. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to contact your empire through whatever emergency backup systems you have access to," Cole said, "and tell them to recall every Vreth fleet operating within 40 light-years of human space, all outposts, all patrol routes, all advanced positions, everything. Full withdrawal to Vreth core territory. I am giving you 4 hours to make that happen." "And if I refuse?" Vrathka said. There was a pause of about 3 seconds. "Then this conversation ends and a different conversation begins," Cole said. And that was all she said. The channel went quiet. Vrathka's senior officers gathered close, speaking fast, speaking low, debating what to do. Drevath wanted to negotiate. Vrava wanted to test one of the outer human ships with a probe shot to see how they responded. 2 other officers thought the human numbers were inflated somehow, a bluff, a holographic trick. Vrathka listened to all of them and then made his decision. He refused Cole's demand. He broadcast his refusal clearly and professionally, citing Vreth Dominion authority, citing the council vote as legal justification for his presence, citing 12 prior campaigns as evidence of Dominion resolve. Cole did not respond immediately. 4 hours passed. At the 4-hour mark, to the exact minute, the human fleet moved. What happened next was not a wild charge. It was not an explosion of chaos. It was something far more frightening. It was organized, deliberate, and unstoppable in the way that only something very carefully planned over a very long time could be. The human ships at the edge of the formation, the fast attack ships, did not go for Vreth hulls first. They went for the escape corridors. They moved into every possible exit angle and locked them down with overlapping fire patterns, cutting off retreat completely. This took less than 4 minutes. The Vreth fleet was now a sealed box. Then the communication ships moved, specialized human vessels that Vrathka had not seen before, with large dish arrays on their spines, and they broadcast a signal on every Vreth frequency that overloaded and jammed every external communication attempt. If his ships tried to talk to anything outside the solar system, this was now impossible. Then the human carriers opened their bays. Fighter craft poured out by the hundreds, sleek, fast, dark-hulled ships that moved in tight coordinated swarms rather than the loose spread formations that Vreth fighter doctrine used. They did not attack immediately, and they positioned themselves between the Vreth capital ships and the nearest escape routes, filling the space so densely that there was no gap a Vreth hull could slip through without taking fire from 20 directions. Vrathka watched all of this happen and felt something he had not felt since he was a young soldier in his very first battle: genuine fear. Then the big guns started. The human siege platforms had been holding position at medium range, enormous ships, built wide and heavy, with weapons mounted along their entire length. When they fired, Vrathka expected energy beams or missile salvos, the standard weapons of a space-capable military force. What he got was something his engineers had never told him about because they had never imagined it existed. The first weapon was a directed gravity pulse, a concentrated wave of gravitational force that hit 3 Vreth destroyers on the left flank and crumpled them like paper cups being squeezed by an invisible hand. The hulls folded. The ships did not explode. They just collapsed inward, deformed beyond any possibility of function, floating in the shape of crushed metal rather than warships. The second weapon was something Cole's people called a quantum disruption charge. It detonated in the center of the Vreth formation and released a wave that spread outward through a specific frequency range. A frequency range that happened to match the power system harmonics of Vreth engine cores. 22 Vreth ships went dark simultaneously, their engines simply stopping, all power gone, drifting helplessly in place. And the Vreth fleet returned fire. Of course they did. Vrathka's people were soldiers, and soldiers did not stop fighting just because they were afraid. Missiles launched by the hundreds. Energy weapons fired from every ship that still had power. The human fleet was surrounded, and it was taking everything the Vreth could still throw, and the human point defense systems caught almost all of it. The ships at the edge of the human formation had hull-mounted arrays that tracked incoming fire automatically and intercepted it, not just with counter-missiles, but with short-range energy pulses that detonated warheads before they got within lethal range. The coverage was so dense and so fast that Vreth salvos that should have torn through a fleet simply disappeared before they arrived. In 3 hours, 94 Vreth warships were either destroyed, disabled, or boarded. Boarded, because Cole had specifically ordered that where possible, Vreth ships with living crews should be taken intact. Human soldiers in armored suits moved through docking connections and forced entries, securing ship after ship, not with cruelty, but with overwhelming precision. They took prisoners. They gave medical care to Vreth wounded. They did not fire on crew members who surrendered. This confused the Vreth survivors more than anything else about the entire battle. Throughout all of it, Cole sat in Bunker 16 and did not celebrate. She watched the displays, she read the updates, she confirmed every order that came back for authorization. When the last Vreth ship signaled its surrender, she took a long breath and put her hands flat on the desk in front of her. Then she looked at her communications officer and said one thing: "Open a channel to the Galactic Council." When the channel opened, she did not speak a single word. She just routed a live feed of the battle's aftermath directly into the main display of every council chamber on every council world. The wreckage, the captured ships, the intact human fleet still in perfect formation, the solar system still completely under human control. And then she added a timestamp at the bottom of the feed, showing clearly, in numbers no one could argue with, exactly how long it had taken. 2 hours, 58 minutes. She let them watch for a long time before she finally closed the channel. Betrayed by the Council, Earth's war fleet emerged and unleashed total destruction. The Galactic Council chamber was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the comfortable quiet of a session that had not started yet, or the focused quiet of a vote being read aloud. This was the quiet of 17 species, sitting with their mouths closed because none of them could think of a single thing to say that would make the situation better. Council head Sorvak sat at the head of the ring table and watched the timestamp on Cole's feed count upward from 2 hours and 58 minutes. He watched the footage of Vreth ships drifting in collapsed ruin. He watched the human fleet, the real human fleet, the one that had never appeared on any registry, and the one that nobody at this table had known existed, sitting in perfect formation around what remained of the Vreth force. He had made a decision he believed was logical. He had run numbers, weighed risks, considered outcomes. The Vreth had been threatening. Humanity had seemed small. The math had appeared simple. He was now understanding very clearly that the math had been completely wrong. One of the junior aides posted at the back of the chamber leaned toward another and whispered, "How did they hide that many ships for that long?" The aide next to her whispered back, "How did they build that many ships without anyone knowing?" A third aide, further along the wall, did not whisper anything. She was still looking at the screen, at the part of the feed showing what the directed gravity weapons had done to the Vreth destroyers. And then she was quietly deciding that she wanted a different career. Olavesh, the Torvian ambassador, raised her hand slowly, not to speak, just in a small, helpless gesture. Then she lowered it again because she realized there was nothing useful for the hand to do. The Kailu representative, who had attended Marcus Webb's birthday gathering just 2 months ago, was staring at the table. He was thinking about that gathering, about the food Marcus had brought from Earth, about how Marcus had laughed at a story his colleague told, about how completely ordinary and warm and non-threatening Marcus had seemed. And he was realizing that he had made a fundamental error in judgment that had nothing to do with numbers at all. He had confused calm with weak. He had confused patient with harmless. He had looked at a species that smiled and offered friendship and never once raised its voice in the council chamber, and he had decided that this meant they had nothing worth fearing. He had not once asked himself what was underneath all that patience, and what it would look like if it was ever finally pushed past its limit. He now had his answer. The door to the holding corridor opened, and Marcus Webb walked in. He walked in alone, no escort, because the 2 guards who had been stationed at his room had quietly disappeared an hour ago once the battle feed started coming through. He still had his formal blue diplomat's jacket on, slightly wrinkled from the cot. And he walked to the human seat at the ring table and sat down very calmly as if he had simply stepped out for a moment. Nobody stopped him. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody would quite meet his eyes. Marcus looked around the room at every face. He took his time. He looked at each one long enough that they understood he was looking, and then he moved to the next. He did not say anything for almost a full minute. When he finally spoke, his voice was even and quiet. "I want to say something on behalf of humanity," he said, "and I want everyone in this room to hear it clearly. We do not want revenge. We are not here to take territory. We are not here to make the galaxy afraid of us. We never wanted any of those things. All we ever asked for was to be treated as equals, to sit at this table as partners. Not as something to be traded away when it became convenient for everyone else." He paused. "You decided that was too much to ask, so we are done asking." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and placed a document on the table. It was a single printed page, old-fashioned physical human paper, with a formal header at the top in both English and universal script. Earth's formal withdrawal from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. "We are leaving this body," Marcus said. "We are withdrawing from every treaty, every agreement, every shared institution we have been part of for 11 years. We will manage our own space, defend our own borders, and govern our own people without this council's involvement or permission." He stood up. "We have sent a separate document to every species represented here. A new treaty, written by us, offered freely. Its terms are simple. Do not attack us. Do not betray us. Do not attempt to use us as currency in your political arrangements. In exchange, we will trade, we will share knowledge, and we will be the kind of neighbors that we have always tried to be." He looked at Sorvak one final time. "Some of you have already received communications from your home governments asking you to sign that treaty as fast as possible. I suggest you do." He walked out. The room stayed quiet for a long time after the door closed behind him. The Vreth Dominion, without its primary war fleet, and with the complete footage of its defeat being broadcast on every news network in the galaxy, collapsed into internal chaos within weeks. And the powerful faction that had pushed for expansion lost all its political support overnight. 3 separate internal power groups began fighting over control of the Dominion's remaining resources, and the empire that had threatened 14 star systems with its strength spent the next 18 months completely occupied with its own survival. 7 species signed Earth's new treaty within 48 hours. 4 more signed within the week. 3 others sent delegations to human space to begin discussions. The remaining 3 said nothing publicly, which in diplomatic terms meant they were scared and needed more time. 3 months later, Marcus Webb stood on a street in his home city, a wide, busy street full of ordinary people doing ordinary things, and watched the traffic pass. He had been back on Earth for a week. It felt strange after 11 years away. The buildings were the same, but the city felt different to him, or maybe he was the one who was different. He walked for a long time until he reached the memorial wall on the south side of the old government district. It was a long gray wall with names carved into it, not from the recent battle, but from every conflict in human history going back centuries. Names going back so far that some of the carving styles had changed multiple times along its length. Different hands, different eras, all adding to the same long list. Every betrayal, every war, every broken promise, every moment where someone had decided that human lives were worth less than whatever they wanted to gain. Marcus put his hand flat against the stone and felt how cold it was. He thought about Sorvak's face when the vote passed. He thought about the timestamp on Cole's battle feed. He thought about 41 years of engineers working in secret, in the dark, in ocean trenches and hollow asteroids, building something they hoped would never be needed, but knew probably would. He thought about the young woman who had caught his transmitter signal at 0340 in the morning and had hit the escalation button without hesitating. He thought about all of it for a long time. He did not feel like a winner. He did not feel triumphant. He felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment, all the patience, all the quiet preparation, all the years of smiling across that council table and hoping that this time, with these people, it would be different. It had not been different. And now the galaxy knew something it had not known before, something that would not be forgotten for a very long time. Humanity did not fight back because it wanted to. Humanity fought back because after everything, after every lesson history had written in blood and stone and grief, they had simply made sure they could. Marcus left his hand on the wall a moment longer. Then he turned and walked home.